Good morning. Good morning. Okay, can you hear me? Do I need to clap? You can hear me. Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome. It is, some of you have seen me at the front of the podium this morning or yesterday and speaking to the large group of 900 people. It's much better speaking to this group. This is like speaking to family, just having a conversation. So I am Dr. Michele Bowers, and I'm the proud president of CAAASA, former superintendent, Lancaster School District, served there for 10 years. I have been in education for 30 years and have served as a teacher, principal, assistant principal, district level administration, various district level administration positions, including assistant soup. I don't know if we have any parents in the room, but I'm a parent. I worked as a classified person. I'm a grandparent. So I got a whole lot of things. And the newest hat I wear is retiree. So got lots of hats that I wear. But it is truly a pleasure and an honor to be part of the conversation that we're going to have this morning. And I would like to introduce my compadre in crime this morning, Dr. Tony Wold.
So my name is Tony Wold, and I am also a retired associate superintendent. My last job was chief business official up in West Contra Costa. I've been a teacher, I've been a football coach, I've been an assessment director, I've been an HR negotiator, I've done pretty much every role all the way through. When I self-retired, the one thing SI&A reached out to me, because I'd been a client for years, and they said, you've always advocated for attendance. And I have since the day I started, that you can't do anything if they're not there in front of you. So they said, would you like to be our CBO in residence? And it's the greatest job ever for retirement, because we get to talk about what's most important and how things have changed. So I'm excited to be working with Michele. I think this is the fourth time we've done it. So we got kind of a rhythm here. Hopefully you guys will have a good time. We're gonna go off and running.
And start running with it. So one of the reasons that I actually agreed to say, yeah, I wanna be in the room and be part of the conversation is because I understand and have always emphasized the importance of our kids being in the room. I mean, this whole experience, the CAAASA experience, is about equity. We talk a lot about equity. We talk a lot about disproportionate outcomes, experiences for our black and brown kids or any kids of color, but it's low socioeconomic kids or special ed kids. We know we have issues of equity. But it begins with, yes, we have to make sure that they have all those essential, critical things at home. So, I recall so vividly when we first had the COVID issue, and the main thing was getting technology to all the babies, right? That was the big thing. And the aha after the first week of really pushing to get technology to all the babies, because I don't know how many people are familiar with Lancaster, but we have a significantly high percentage of low socioeconomic families and homeless and foster and all of those unique issues and challenges that many of the families deal with. I'm sure you all see that. But the question was posed, what about the kids that are sleeping in a car? So I can give a computer to that baby, but where do they plug it in? Where do they get Wi-Fi? So when we start talking about equity, I can, tout that everybody has one, but does everyone really have what they need to be successful? Attendance is one of those critical asks that we have to consider. There are some seats here, so please feel free to find a seat, scoot over, make room, wave a hand, make a friend. Yes, we definitely want you. And the seats move, so if you need a little bit more elbow room,
slide on over.
You can.
And I'll join in about really focusing on getting technology. When we were in West Contra Costa, we found that we also had the same issue. We gave out 5,000 hotspots in the first 3 weeks of 2019. So we went farther. And we took the next facilities bond that we passed, and we had just passed it like 4 days before COVID. We are building our own wireless network for all of our children. I'm retired from there, but it's still on progress, and that's going to provide that network wherever they are, so there won't be a hotspot. So again, it's things like that that really are areas that we have to take those steps to make sure that everyone has the same foundations.
Absolutely. And before the pandemic, we always talked about, attendance is important and keep that ADA, and we need the babies in the room. I don't know how many people are familiar with attendanceworks.org, the website. A few of you. If you have not visited that site, if you have not checked out those resources, please jot it down. attendanceworks.org. We do not have to reinvent the wheel. We need to have conversations like this so we can share good information and share where there's access to resources and ideas. So you can print out flyers, you can give posters, you can see some ideas that other places are doing, implementing, and doing successfully. And most importantly, which we're going to talk to you today about as well, is what the data says about why attendance is so important, why showing up is so critical, and why it's the first step, one of the first essential things that we have to address, make sure that we have a plan to address it before we can even get to the academics and the behaviors and all of that. Because what happens when kids are disengaged or they don't feel that they belong? I mean, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, now has a B, right? It's DEIB, and that B is belonging. So if our kids are not feeling like there's a safe space and place for them in their classrooms, then they don't show up. If they don't feel welcome, then they don't show up. When they don't feel connected, they don't turn their cameras on the Zoom, right? They don't. And when the COVID pandemic is over and they choose not to come back to our classrooms, what are they saying to us? When they choose not to come back to our classrooms, what are they saying? When they wake up in the morning and they choose not to come to our schools, what are they saying to us? And are we asking ourselves why? So we want to explore 5 strategies that we're going to identify and leave with you today. They're not up here yet. We're going to get to them. But really reminding you that the time to really think critically about this and plan your work, then work your plan. My Lancaster people know, they've heard me say that before. Plan your work, then work your plan. That applies to attendance and how you approach it, because it needs to be a seamless part of that foundation. We look everywhere, and as I said, there's lots of resources, but there's a lot of places that you see that have identified this as a critical issue. There's no argument, it's a critical issue, and it's not a critical issue because it's about the ADA. It's not about the ADA. Because to be honest, in the state of California, they have to be bodies in the seats to get that ADA, right? Notes, all the notes in the world don't make any difference. So, but we need them in the room. We need them to hear. We need them to be part. We are Zooming, we have a virtual access to our conference, but if you've ever done a virtual conference, a virtual meeting versus an in-person meeting, is it the same experience? No. It's not the same experience. So we need them to be in the room because their experience, their socialization, their connectedness, their belonging is definitely going to be more present when we have them in there. The opportunity, most importantly, for us to build a relationship is going to be done by getting them in the building, getting them in the chairs, being able to touch them and say, "How you doing today?" Greet them at the door by name. There was a scary statistic that I will share with you, and we'll move on. I could tell stories all day, but how many of our kids show up to our schools and go through the entire day without once hearing a person address them by name or say hello. Not because they're in trouble, but just because they're seen. So we hear a lot about being seen and identity, but if you show up at a school and you can walk around the campus all day, go to lunch, recess, everything, come on and leave, go home, and no one addresses you by name that day. No one says hello to you, greets you by name. How you doing? I care about you. I see you. What's that new song, People? Some people have heard that song. Okay. But yeah, we think about all of those things. It's not just about the adults experiencing those things. We have to think about the environments we create for our kids as well.
After that happens 2, 3, 4 more times, how motivated is that student going to be to come to school at all? And we know attendance is the gateway to student achievement. It's also the first line of defense against lost learning.
Yep. So we talk about the being seen. We have to understand, agree, and own that bias is real. It is. It's not a bad thing. It does not say it's a bad thing. It's real. Each and every one of us have our bias. And I know I have mine. I'm not going to tell you all. But it's good to know them. Why is it good to know them? Because then you can check yourself, right? Then you can check yourself. When you see yourself feeling some kind of way, it's like, ooh, wait a minute. Is that this situation? Is that this person? Or is that me? Is that me? Already anticipating, some of administrators, teachers, little Johnny's coming, it's like, oh God. You haven't even met little Johnny yet. But you already heard about little Johnny. So you're ducking and dodging. Principals, you go and walking down the hall and it's like, okay, let me turn and go down this hallway because I know that person is going to be bringing some kind of negative vibe or something I'm not feeling. Identify your bias. Bias is not a bad thing. It is a representation of our experiences, our lived learnings, who we are, and it can be navigated around. I don't want to say you even need to change it. You just need to recognize it, that it exists. And it exists for our students, it exists for our teachers, our campus supervisors, our classified people. There's not a lot, I will just say this, there's not a lot of training and discussion around bias. I encourage you strongly to think about how you can introduce training and conversations to help people recognize their bias, and there's lots of online tools that can be utilized for this. But think about bringing your classified staff into those conversations. Why? And your counselors. Why? And the counselors even should be able to do it for you. But these are the people on the front lines and our teachers too that are calling these parents when little Johnny's absent and not in school. So just think about it, how you respond based on how you're greeted on the other end and what you expect that conversation is going to go like on the other end. So if I have a bias and I'm like, okay, I got to call little Johnny's mother. My tone is not right. My heart is not right. I'm not calling with a desire to better understand how I can help. Make sure that we create an environment where little Johnny wants to come to school, be in class, and if there's something that is not happening, that is precluding this child from being successful, what can I do? If that's not coming across in how I approach this parent or how I approach the child because of a bias that I have, that I'm not even aware of or navigating around, it just comes out when I see this person's name, even just see the name. So think about how you can incorporate some attention to that.
And so a lot of districts have started to do systemic bias training and really working on anti-racism cultures, but it isn't a training. It is something you have to practice every day, and you have to continue to go forward. And what we found, especially now, is there is a disproportionate number of students of color that are chronically absent. It's a pandemic. It's not California. It's every state. Working with SI&A, I'm in other states as well, and we're seeing this across the entire state. In fact, New Zealand's having issues, Ireland, it's other countries too. The world has changed quite a bit. So if we're gonna have an equity-based approach to attendance management, we're going to have to change and practice that change, because change is uncomfortable. But it starts with being data-centered. You have to have the information to focus. You have to have a systems approach. You think about, we were talking about our classified folks. They are the face of our school district. They are, just like high school principals, the mayor of their little town, superintendents, the mayor of the big town. High school secretaries, everybody knows them. Elementary, that's who the parents first see. If we have great ones, but is the same message and the same feeling conveyed in every one of your schools? And if it's not, then you don't have a systematic approach. It's not about, everyone's gonna have their biases, but you still can build a system to begin to address some of those biases. And it takes practice, and it takes ownership of the people to do that. And then ultimately, you need to have targeted, ongoing communication. We'll talk about it a lot, but it's the 5-to-1 rule. If I go today and tell you, that's an interesting jacket you're wearing, all you're gonna remember, even if I tell you tomorrow, wow, that's amazing, and the next day, that's fantastic, you're still remembering 2 days ago. So it's gonna take at least 5 for you to kind of go, okay, maybe that person wasn't evil. And then when I do it again, now it's gonna take 8. And then if I do it again, I'm done. And so we have to recognize that the equity lens is we have to continually be positive, and the first time anyone ever hears from us has to be positive. It cannot be negative as we go forward. And ultimately, as that funnel shows, if we put these things in place, we can improve student outcomes, student achievement. We're going to show you that later as we go forward. But this is the critical piece, and we're not here to read slides. We're here to really have that conversation. It's a mindset, and it's an attitude. Think about this. 3rd graders today have yet to have a real year of school. In kindergarten, we shut them down and said, get on Zoom. And the teachers, what's Zoom? That's back in March 2019. 1st grade, oh yeah, you're not going to be at school at all. We're going to just do it distance learning. 2nd grade, hey, let's try this hybrid thing. This sounds like a great idea. And now they're in 3rd grade today. Those students, on average, the average 3rd grader has missed almost 18 days per year. So that means that the average, not the chronic, but the average student is almost up to 80 days missed. That's half a year's instruction, not including the disjoint of 2019. It's even worse at high school, if you think about that. The only ones that ever had any experience with secondary schools are the seniors. They got to go to middle school. Yay. We all love middle school. So there is absolutely, I was middle school vice principal, so I survived. Yeah, see, like we said, we all have a bias. So what we know is we've got high school students that need to be taught how high school works. My daughter's a 1st-year high school teacher this year in San Francisco, and she's saying, and she had done student teaching in middle school before. She goes, it's a whole different thing. It's like you got big kids, but middle school understanding a school that you miss 1 day, you miss 6 because of the way those subjects go. So when you look at this here, you really need to think about how are we going to message that? Because if the kids don't know, do the parents? This is one of my favorite things. We allow for illness. People are going to get sick. In fact, I don't really think perfect attendance is the right pathway. I believe that you want to have positive attendance there, and what we know is this. Once you cross double digits, academic achievement starts to fail, and I'll talk more about that. So if you missed 1 day a month, pretty normal, that's 95% attendance, by the way. 1 day a month is 95%. That student, before they graduate, is going to miss 3/4 of a year of instruction. And every time, once you get in the second year again, every time you miss even more. If they miss 1 day a quarter, we're now crossing, same deal. It really starts to add up as we go. So this is just something to understand and communicate, that parents don't know what they don't know about how it builds up. And here's what's happened since the pandemic. Before the pandemic, the way SI&A monitors attendance is they do it, the excellent is 1% or less of absences. The next band is satisfactory, that is up to 95%. Then you have the manageable. These are the students that drop down to 90%, meaning they miss 17 or fewer days. Chronic starts at below 90%, 18 days. Severe is at 85%. So before the pandemic, pretty decent across the state of California. 15% were chronic or severe, and we were trying to work on that group to change it. We had 64% that were doing just fine, over the 95%. You can see we don't count 2021 because that was fake. But we just keep on going on, and we look at 22, 23, and where we are right now today, not last year, which wasn't so great, today, 32%, 32% of our students are still chronic. SI&A's looked at the ones that districts we work with, almost 2/3 of the chronic students this year were chronic last year. So it's a multiplying effect that plays in. And on the top end, 40%. That's all. So our average kids are more on the brink of going chronic than they are anything else.
Before you leave that slide, how many people understand how many days chronic is? What chronic absenteeism is? So I see lots of heads. So how many days is considered chronic? How many days?
18.
I'm hearing a lot of...
Yes, and therein starts the messaging that 18 days is chronic.
Days. So I was going to say, I'm hearing lots of different responses. And the reason that I bring that up and why it's important that we understand as we look at this data, we think about how many months in the school year our kids are in school. 18 days, when I say 18 days, it's like, oh, that's not bad. That's a long time. How many days a month? Two days. 2 days of absence a month is going to result in a child being looked at as chronic and subject to all of the things that could possibly be happening that distract them from being successful in school. 2 days a month doesn't seem like a lot, and as a parent, how often do we say, I'm just going to, we're going to go to Disneyland since we're going to be in Anaheim and take that 1 day, or I got to do this, or I got to do that. So it's easy to get to 2 days a month. I understand a lot of people have things, but that's why it's so critically important that we think about these 5 strategies, that we plan our work, that we work our plan, that we make sure we educate our parents, our teachers, our classified staff, so that they understand it's not about the number, it's about the impact. It's about the impact.
And here's the impact. Really simply put, University of Chicago did the landmark study on this. They tracked hundreds of thousands of students who dropped out of high school, failed high school courses. And the number one correlative fact they found is 67% of those students had been chronic for a year or multiple years prior to their dropping out. It is without a doubt the number one red flag. You look, demographics, which we always say is the underlying piece, while it does have an impact, that's only 7% because they just didn't have the right foundation. 5% for test scores. So it's not that they can't do it. It's they're not there. And once you start to fall behind, you feel a very different feeling inside yourself. When you don't understand, if you've ever traveled to a foreign country and you don't speak the language, you feel out of place a little bit, like I'm confused. And that feeling when you're in school, when nobody said your name, and you never had that feeling, you add that on top, it's isolated. It really feels, that's why we've had so much emotional change, and we've had to bring in so much SEL, social emotional learning, in our schools, because it's really been a dramatic shift. So again, how much time and money, this is kind of the question that, how much are we putting and investing in making sure that there's the right culture before we even start? Because ultimately, what you manage and what you build is what you're going to get. And so we look at it, everybody now has a student information system. They also have an IEP management system because we have to. And if you did not have one, you sure found one real quick in 2019, a learning management system that works. We need attendance management systems. Again, it needs to be something that's there no matter who's in the seat. When I leave from District A to District B, I want that system to be there and continue irrespective of my leadership as we go forward. So, I have a question for everyone here. How many of you have children of your own?
Oh, the baby.
That is
That's so nice.
fantastic. So I want you to think about this. How did you know what you, as the parent, and your child, how did they know what they needed to do to be ready to get into kindergarten and be successful, to go to 7th grade, and to go through and move to 9th grade? How did you and your child know? Tell your neighbor.
It's going very well.
Yeah, I like this.
Yeah.
This I love. This is why I keep saying, at some point, this is a point of less sales, but more of this dialogue and conversation to change the narrative. Right. Normally I would have already stopped it, but wow, that was one of the most interesting things.
Okay,
I may have lost the room.
Thank you. We need a mic.
Hey, you know,
There you go.
there's nothing better than having that conversation. So, is there anyone in the room that would be willing to share how they knew, or if you don't want to share what the other person said. That way you get away with that. Anyone want to share how you knew?
Oh, there's a hand
Yes.
up there.
So, my coworker was saying she knew because she already taught them that at home.
Ah.
So the foundation was set by the way you went and dealt with every day, so your children just knew this is the expectation. My wife actually yelled at me yesterday. We used to live down here, and when our daughter was young, everyone would go to Disneyland, and I would yell, "No, you're not." And she said, "You know, you wouldn't let us go to Disneyland." And I go, "Isn't it funny that I'm talking about attendance now?" So it plays out.
There was a hand back in the back.
Someone, yes.
For me and my partner both, we had relatives that were in the educational system, so they kind of helped guide us. My mom was a teacher, and I was a teacher by the time my kids came through school. And for her aunt was a teacher, so they kind of guided us so we knew. But in our experience as teachers, we find that a lot of our families don't know how to navigate the system. We don't have
That is what I was hoping to hear. Because sometimes we hear the answer, "I didn't know. I had no idea." Some people admit that. Others, but it's usually, that's just the way we were raised, and that's the way we raised our kids.
Right.
Or I knew somebody in the system, I was in the system, or I don't know. Second question, how many of you, when you look at the district or school that you work at, have an unduplicated count, free and reduced, all the different categories, of over 60%.
Over 60.
Over 60. Not many.
You don't have an unduplicated
So this is free.
account over
This
60?
is free and reduced lunch. This is.
No, we do.
Yeah, I was going to say, raise your hand.
I was going to say.
Nobody's raising their hand. I'm like, all these rich people up in here?
Yeah.
Really?
So that goes back to what we said in the back. How do those families know? Who is giving them the ongoing information? It's not a one-time thing, because it's not, hey, we had an orientation. If they came, we're going to take care of them. How can we level the playing field? We're going to talk about this a lot more as we go, but I want you to think about that. If you answered, I don't know, then you already got it in your head. But if you answered that, I know a lot of my students didn't, how are we going to get them there? And so parents don't know what's going on. If you're doing the truancy notifications and the letters yourself, on average, you're sending notifications to 10 to 20% of your students. However, when you look at the actual stats of where students are and when you're doing it best practice, which means catching it early and intervening, you should be sending triple that in some places. And it's not happening. The issue is, though, this is reactive communication. Reactive communication will work for those that are already used to following order and just slipped a little bit. But if they are not, then you're going to need something else, and we'll talk about that as well. So there's your process. If you do it yourself, that's what you're doing. I just let it go because you get tired. And by the way, I will send this to CAAASA so they can post it up on the website, so you'll be able to pull everything down later. So this is what did you see with your staff trying to do this in Lancaster, Michele?
Oh my goodness. Well, we are a district, and one of the reasons I'm here is because I'm a fan. I'm a cheerleader. I'm a user because I'm a believer. How many people have heard the statement, take something off my plate? You want me to do this? Take something off. What you going to take off my plate? What don't you want me to do? Because I don't have time. So I appreciate and respect and honor what they're saying, because it's real. It is real. And when we are asking people to add the amount of structured work and a systemic approach to reinforce, you know what positive behavior interventions and supports are, right? Yeah. You do the same thing. This is PBIS on steroids about attendance. That's what it is. Because we want to reinforce those good behaviors of attendance, showing up on time every day for our students and for our parents. Because many of the parents have not had those behaviors instilled. So how can they teach something they don't know? Okay, but I recognized that it's a huge amount of work to ask your staff to do this on a consistent basis. So I'm running around the district going, glory, hallelujah, and people are giving out things and doing incentives here and there in some places. In other places, they just couldn't get to it. They just couldn't get to it. So really, what is it that I want and need the staff to spend their time on? Sending out letters? Is that what I really want and need them to do? But is that an important piece? Yes. It's an important piece. But that's not where I'm going to get the most bang for my buck. Because and especially in 2023, there's a systematic approach to getting that done. And that's why we're here. Is because we don't want to work harder, we want to work smarter. Thank you.
And we don't have enough people, so we have to find solutions to be able to maximize the attention to kids with the ones we have. Here's the funny stat. When you send out mail, it actually provides an electric feeling. How many of you, when you get home and you see that Amazon package on the porch, go, yes, I'm excited, and I'm going to open that up because it's a present. But here's what we know. Research shows that in 2022, the average person that gets an email spends only 10 seconds reading that email. It went down from 12 seconds, so our attention is getting even worse. Thank you, TikTok. And When they did a survey, Gallup did a whole survey of folks, if you get a letter that is personally addressed to you, especially if it's coming from a serious place, the people instantly know that they're going to take the time to open it and read it, and they consciously put their focus on that. When you have emails, it's easy to glance at an email or a text and then just let it go and it just kind of goes right through your head. Yeah. Mail actually does work if done right. And the way I kind of look at it is, there's two kinds of information. There is information that is actionable, and then there's information that is discretionary. It's informational. It's like, hey, we got a meeting. Electronic communication is great for discretionary, not good for actionable. As we go. So here we go, into strategy.
You know, you're my data man, so you go right ahead.
All right. So data needs to tell a story. It needs to really inspire action. We're going to go kind of faster because we want to get into the solutions. The idea is you have to be looking at the information. Know what's going on so you can make a difference. This is what's happened when you look at the change in attendance behaviors. I want you to look not at this ugly, ugly blue. Look at the grays. That's where we were before. And look how much lower across the state our youngest students were. Now look at the trend. They do not have the habits. I wrote something on our blog a couple weeks ago. I said, this is a national crisis. There is nothing more important. And if you don't think it's a crisis, please understand this. These kids right here are going to be paying your pension.
That's keeping it real.
So it's the best way I could do it. And then seniors, you talk about disillusion having to change. It really has changed the piece. So we're going to talk about strategies to work with each grade level. Yes, sir.
Is this a national statistic?
This is state, but I can tell you I've looked at the national and it almost overlaps it. There's almost no real change. What we found is districts that have a systemic approach to attendance are here. Districts that don't have a systemic approach to attendance are higher. So you talk about an LA Unified where 45% of their students are chronically absent, the Chicago Public Schools, some of the bigger ones that didn't have a system in place. It really changes what's happening. And I don't believe that it matters about money or days. It's learning time. And this is the average student. If you divide by 5 here, you're at 19 days for the kindergartner. You get out to the high school, you divide by 6. That's how much school the average kid is missing. And remember when I said 67% that were chronic are the indicator for dropout? Once you cross 10 absences, go below 95%, there is an exponential decrease in academic outcomes for that student. Your A and B student becomes a C and sometimes a D student. And once you get a couple of those, when you've never had them before, everything shuts off. And they become more at risk than any group ever. Yes?
So going back to this slide for just a moment, just a reminder, and you'll see more of this in the resources provided on attendanceworks.org if you go on there. But at what grade level are our kids learning to read? Correct. And what is happening when we look at all of these hours missed? So if they have those gaps in third preschool, first, preschool, kindergarten, first, second grade, and they have those patterns, those habits of mind, what's happening with learning to read? So are we surprised that by the time they get to the third and fourth grade that we have these huge disparities, these huge gaps, and if I can't read, when I show up to the classroom, what's my behavior gonna look like? Okay, so isn't all of this connected? It's all connected. This is why it's important that we really emphasize the importance of showing up early on and continue to emphasize it.
So we're going to go real quick, but this shows you that what I was talking about. Those that have an approach, because again, we can't measure everyone's, but what we do at the end of the year, we're able to pull the attendance data for everywhere and compare it to those that we have. So we're able to get those trends and make these pretty fair assessments. And this is one of the things that I believe everyone should be doing. Look at your attendance pattern, because sometimes you may want to change calendars. Sometimes you may find, oh, I've got an issue I didn't even know was starting to happen. And the idea here is green is you're below the normal average. Yellow, you're already at your average. That's not really good. And red means, uh-oh, there's a fire. Let's start addressing this as we go forward. The new normal has changed. Districts were 94 to 97% attendance. That was the average district in California and most of the nation, except for some of the southern states. Before, it dropped down to 91.01. Remember, chronic is 89.99. So the average district almost went chronic last year. And that was, just so we're all clear, the median. That means half of the districts in California were below that number. There. And so when we looked at the first, we looked at 100 school districts over the first 30 days, and then we've expanded it now to the first 100 days. I just didn't put it on the slide. And what we found was that the new normal is 92.5. That is about 3 to 4% down because behaviors have changed. And that's where we're going with this whole conversation is we've got a whole new normal. And I'm going to magnify this a little bit. Pre-pandemic, the total missed students, we have 5.2 million students in K-12 districts in California. They missed, in 2019, before the pandemic, they missed 42 million days of school. After the pandemic, they still missed those 42 million plus 49 million. We are almost crossing 90 million days of school. What does that equal? 227,000 students just gone. For many of you, that's your entire county plus the one next door as we go. And then you wonder why money's very different. I'm the CBO, so I always go into the calculations. This year, we get this great 8% potential COLA, but the reality is, the reason the state could do that is because they're not giving us $2.8 billion from that lost ADA, even with the 3-year average. So it changes the economic indicators, it changes everything. But the 2.8 is horrible. This is where we've got to put our attention. And so we have to, I've said it before, we have to have a coherent process. The design matters when we do it. That's what we're talking about. And when we look at absences for students of color, this is what we're seeing. And you take a look at right here. We're here because this happened. I know I was in West Contra Costa. We have a very populace of African American Black students and families. Their parents are not fans of the school district. They are disenfranchised because they had a horrible experience going through. Their children are not having a good experience. We have to, if we work there, we have to recognize everything we say is going to be gauged with that belief that we're not genuine with what we do. And in 2019, when we closed down, we had, of all the missing students, the highest percentage, almost 60%, were black students that we couldn't find to re-engage. And I thought it was just us. It was Tennessee, it was Mississippi, it was all over the nation because the systemic bias is everywhere and connecting back. So when we take a look at just the data, that 39% and that higher trajectory, that's the students here we're talking about today. And look at the lost learning time. Look how much bigger it is for all the other groups. And then there's your types of attendance behavior. So if you take a look, that the vast majority are in the far right, meaning missing more days. You've got 33% that miss more than 35 days. 1 out of 3 black students missed more than 35 days last year. How does that make you feel when you think about it that way? And imagine if you can take that message back to the people you work with and have them feel it. Actually feel it. That's what leaders do, is they genuinely get to that feeling and go, okay, I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to feel the pain, and I'm going to work through it. Because there is other bias. There's economic bias too. Before the pandemic, here's what we know. If you had very, for no better term, rich kids, you had better attendance. Back to, my family knew I had the entire setup, everything was built. And it didn't matter whether you were in an elementary district, a unified district, it didn't matter, basic aid, not, the percentages were much higher. This year we had our CAASA scores come out. And something really interesting that I found was, so I did this. I took all the elementary districts, I took all the unified, and I took all the high school, and I sorted them into 4 bands by unduplicated count, and then looked at their average performance. So a unified district, and we have over 200,000 students in that category there that are low socioeconomic, 74% met or exceeded English standards. Same district, 1,000,001 student count, same unified configuration, 31% met or exceeded standards if they were 80 to 100% unduplicated. What this told me, plain and simple, is back to the how did they know? We have not done our job to level the playing field. We have to change the way we talk about things, because those numbers, they're across everything. So you take a look at this. If you've looked at the 400 meters before, does that look like it's equitable? Where I get to start way up in front of you. Not at first, until you know that somebody actually figured out that if you started all in the same place, it wasn't fair, and that you were actually punishing people that started in the outside lanes. They didn't know it when they first started track and field, because nobody had thought to walk around and measure. They just assumed it was the same. But then they got it right, and they created the lane staggers, and we've had some of the most exciting Olympic races ever. So it really changed the idea. When we talk about equity, when we talk about everyone has the same foundation to start, so now it's going to be on what work you put in and all that to see who competes. But now I'm going to show you 4 students. I'm going to show you a dropout. I'm going to show you an English language learner. I'm going to show you a black student. And I'm going to show you a reclassified fluent English proficient student. And I want you to tell me who is where here. And I'll help by putting a couple lines out there. Oh, I tricked you. So which student is where? Because you start with the marathon. Number 1, is that equitable? Who's going to come in first? They are. They're going to be the first ones there because they knew something. They knew to get there early, or they knew something that all of the rest didn't know, or they made that sacrifice to be there and make a difference. Then you look at these in the back. They're going to have to run harder, faster, exert more energy, and they're going to have to navigate this massive humanity that's in their way, trying to force them to stop and take them away from everything they're trying to do. This is how our students feel. All they see is the back of the person in front of them. So, who is this?
Your black student, your EL student,
Black is black.
your RFEP.
Yep, reclassified. Black students there. Where's my dropout?
Still at home.
Yeah. Over here, they're not in the race. They're watching. It's a trick question. There. As we go, but that's what us teachers do. I was a teacher before. So this just gives you a visual of what the feeling is. Now, I know with marathons they do different clocks and stuff, but that's not the point. The point is, what if we taught these two families that if you come 5 minutes earlier, you're going to be up here? If you actually read this 2 weeks ago or 4 years ago when you were in preschool, you're going to be up here. What if we could provide them what you provided your family? What if we could do that to every single kid, regardless of the language they speak, regardless of where they start? What we know is this: if you have a system, this is what happens. Those districts that maintain, and this is only negative messaging, graduation rates go up. But now we're going to flip the script and we're going to say, this does not work anymore. The negative punitive messaging has failed us. I am convinced that any district that keeps doing the same thing is going to keep getting worse and worse results. We have to change. So here we go. Communication.
This is the part I love. Communicate, and over-communicate, right? That's what it's all about. And we have to communicate differently than we have in the past. The negative, no one wants to keep showing up, picking up the phone, opening mail, opening email, if you are beating them up or threatening them. Where did the phone call come in that started with building a relationship? Where did the phone call come in that says, hey, busy parent who doesn't have this, doesn't have that, and your most important thing is where you're going to sleep tonight, you're doing a good job. We appreciate you trying. We appreciate you bringing your child to school today. So we really do have to think about, especially in this day and age, our families went through so much, as did our staff, as did so many, all of us, through COVID. So did everyone post-COVID just rebound and we're feeling all warm and fuzzy? No, people are tired. People are still struggling with how to get their lives back together. And in many instances, they have to start anew or figure out all of these things. I know when in my world, there's a lot of things I have to do differently. They're never going to go back. They're never going to go back. And that's okay. But for many of our families, we have to think about, is it cool for us to go back to communicating the same way we did and have a line of people sending out calls or calling them, where's your child today? They're truant, they're this, they're that, they're the other. Or this poor child who is just, it just hurts my heart when we take our babies, the little ones. Do they get themselves to school? No. They don't. So why are we beating up on them if they're late or they're absent? We need to help. They're asking for help. That's why communication is so important.
It's about the people. It's about how we recognize our biases, just like that elementary teacher that thinks the tough love of telling the second grader, you are late again, you can't do that, doesn't recognize that they're not understanding that that's a bias.
Right.
They're setting up that student that going, what can I do? I don't drive. I don't know what to do. They don't understand, and they're trying to figure it out. And so we've got to find a way to really be meaningful and systematic in our communication and avoid just the unintended consequences of our words. One of the things I had to learn when I moved up, I moved into being director and cabinet level really young. Shouldn't have done it. Because you haven't sat in the seats long enough to really understand. And what I did not recognize is when I spoke, it was policy. I could no longer have an opinion. all the things I could do as a teacher, I couldn't do it anymore. And so I had to learn to be systemic with what I did and calibrate. I'm not speaking until me and the soup have talked. and yes, Michele, are we on the same page? Okay, is this the wording we're going to do? Now I can speak because I'm speaking with us, not against us or for us. And that's kind of the idea of working as a team. And this goes back to teaching. If you've been a teacher, you probably know, you may not remember, it's Herman Eberhaus from the 1880s, but he did the landmark study on how people remember. This is really important. The marketing companies use this more than anything else. People that do advertising know that it takes between 6 and 20 impressions, whether it's seeing it, hearing it, touching it, to get brand awareness. Then you have to consistently reinforce it to keep it. I want you to think about where you live. If you have a McDonald's on the way to and from work, you drive by it every day. You see them golden arches. You see the billions served. They're saying, hey, everybody's doing it, so why don't you? That's why they do that. But I bet you go to McDonald's twice a month. You shouldn't, but you do. But then you move. You go to a whole new home because, sometimes life has changes and we're different neighborhood. Guess what? When you drive to and from work now, there's no McDonald's. There's a Wendy's. Guess what? 2 to 3 months later, you're eating Wendy's. One, it's convenient, but because of brand awareness. Who do you think is the single best company in the world at brand awareness and keeping you aware of them? Thank you. Think about it. You cannot not see them. And so Starbucks lives with the Eberhaus curve. I taught you this. Tomorrow, you're going to start forgetting what Michele and I have talked about. And pretty soon, I went to a session with them. I don't remember that at all. But if you pull up the documents or you look at the pictures you took in your phone, boom, you brought it right back up. Your cognition came back up. But then like everything else, like age, it degrades. You start going down. So teachers know in spiraling, bring it back again. And look what's starting to happen now. It's flattening out. It's becoming a habit. And then the third time, you pretty much own that belief. This is what we have to do with parents. This is how we have to do it. Consistency over and over again. I've lost whose side it is.
I was going to say that's okay. We're going because I too want to make sure that we go through all of the strategies, and I'm watching our time. So, communication is key. We've talked about it. Think about what does that look like in your district now? How many folks have a district or school site that has a systematic approach? You have a system. So a few of you. Okay. And is it working? How many folks have a system that is working for them? Would you say it's working for you? Beautiful. So what do you think makes it work? I'm not putting you on the spot, but any thoughts on why it's working for you?
You just mentioned the word. You have to be systematic about it. It has to be consistent. And the message we do use
SI&A? Mm-hmm.
I didn't pay her.
Right, no.
We do use them in getting the information out, the letters out, and analyzing the data. They do a great job of sending us the data. So that chart that you flashed really fast about looking at when the absences are, we utilize that a lot with our principals. So if we know it's like, Fryman's disease.
Right.
Love that.
So, put your awards or whatever on those days to kind of encourage them to come. Give out the treats on Fridays, or have an assembly, the fun assembly on a Monday.
Right. So this is, while you do a lot of other things at the school, this is the foundation, is having that systematic approach, different access to things. So thank you very much for sharing. Think about what that looks like in your district and why this is so important, because if your folks are not making those phone calls and doing those events and building those relationships, if instead they're sending out letters, how many letters do you have to send out? It takes time, costs money to print them up, print those labels, and that's not even getting to the phone calls and all of that Good stuff. Not only that, how efficient is it as far as timeliness? I know, how long does it take from the time you run the report or figure out who to send it to? Are you sending it out? And by the time they actually receive it, how relevant is it? So just something to think about.
In the back, I saw a question real quick.
I have a question.
Yes.
A principal assistant, or I do from the reports, like twice a week maybe.
Mhm.
I get from last week, and I do make phone calls, maybe let's just say 4 days out of the 5.
Kudos to you for that.
Absolutely.
I'm still aware that's mine, but I'm still waiting.
Mhm.
And with the excuses I get from parents, well, aside I'm talking about the Saturday and they should come, so I invite them to that,
Mhm.
of their days. Like, I fell asleep, I went to Disneyland.
Right,
I said, they are not safe. She's like, no. And
right.
it's like, and so, and they really, or just, she felt not to go to school. She had, and I don't know what to put out of the excuses. We have codes, and I don't know.
You don't
Well,
have a
guess
code
what?
for Disneyland?
If you're down here, you should, but guess what? Give us the next couple slides. We're going to tell you what we can do about that.
There you go.
Because
There you go.
that is the problem right there. I don't even know how to code this absence. It's just wrong there because I don't know.
Right.
So it's when you send those systemic messages, are they the same? Are you telling the 7th grade family the same thing you're telling a kindergartner or a 2nd grade family? If you are, you're losing that connection. What you do and how you speak needs to be, just like a teacher, differentiated. You need to differentiate communication. When you're talking to the younger students' parents, it's all about education. It's about building the foundation.
Yep.
We are building a house. We have got to have a solid foundation. So everything we do should never be punitive. It should always be, did you know? How about this? What can you do? What's a good strategy with them when they don't want to eat their vegetables?
Right.
Whatever. It's stuff like that that builds on it. Then you flip. You move from educating to sustaining in that middle school and the transition. Oh God, I got to transition. How am I going to do this? The world has changed. So all of your communication is about, you got some anxiety. How do you deal with that? How do you feel when you've got all these changes going on? Different communication. The parents don't know because the kids are telling them, I don't want to talk to you, Mom and Dad. So they need help, but they're not allowed to come to the school to get it. So how do we get that to them? High school, it's all about where you're going. We understand CT, but it's not, you got to graduate this. It's where do you want to go and what's your passion getting there? Different messages in college, different messages as you go to career. It's all different the way we communicate. But if you're sending the same thing to everybody, are you augmenting it with more to others?
And just one other thing I just want to emphasize while we're here on this slide is what he said about education and to the point of the lady's comment in the back. What do the majority of our parents and sometimes our staff members, what is the majority of the time, why do they think we want them in school? Is it about the learning or about the money? Money. I didn't hear one person say they think it's about the learning. They think it's about the money because that's what they've been taught to think for so many years. So it's incumbent on us to change that messaging, but we're going to change that messaging by educating them because and we can't do it all at once because they're not educators and they still have to trust that that's where our heart is and that's where the purpose is, the purpose of this conversation. But until they believe that the reason that we care about their child being there, why it's important, is to benefit their child's learning, to set those foundations for not just today in school, but lifelong habits. Lifelong habits, because you can't make it in life and college and all of that if you don't have these good habits. But until we educate them along those lines, we're always going to get something else is more important. The Disneyland, the I gotta do this or I gotta do that, because they believe we're only calling because it's a money thing. So it it is frustrating. I understand your frustration. And thinking about tools that can come in and assist you with educating people proactively as opposed to after they have missed is the part of the systematic approach that really helps to start to turn that tide.
And it's what we got to
Thank
add.
you.
And that's why you have the money guy
Yeah.
talking about achievement. Because if we can flip the money guys or the money ladies to start talking differently, maybe we can change the whole narrative. And so this is some of the ways we're talking about. We're saying we've got to communicate differently. You take a look. That's engaging. That's something that I see it. Okay, I can feel it. Oh, hey, you're welcome back. Here's the superintendent really telling me what's going on. Hey, 7th grade, you're transitioning. Look at all these things that you as a student and family can be connected on. We're going to have your back in this work. We are going to make sure of it. It's postcards. Good job, kid. Well done. Don't send those to the high school kids, though. If you send a llama to a high school kid, you've lost the entire day. But you send that to a 3rd grader, and that 3rd grader happens to be the son of your board president. One, it's going on the refrigerator, but the next board meeting, it's coming in. And she's going to be sharing that. And it doesn't mean that they're perfect. It means that we care and we're connected. And just like I said, mail matters. That postcard comes addressed to your child. That changes the narrative really quickly.
So you don't have to do an award ceremony every day. Look how easy this is.
There's some high school ones. Very different look. Dreaming big, it's about motivation, showing you care. It's really that. So, open your envelope.
Woo, tell me who's got the $100 bill. Hurry up, hurry up. Everybody's like, okay, well, let me open it up.
Your slide, how people access.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, we're going to post the entire deck to the CAAASA website. And you can just go to the website for resources from the conference. Thank you so very much.
Everyone has something in your hand. How do you feel?
I know it's not as warm and fuzzy as that $100 bill, but it's all good. It's all good.
If most of you said you have children. If that came to your house for your child, how would you be feeling that night?
How would your child
And
be feeling
how
that
would
night?
you talk to them?
Yeah, they would feel good. And think about it, those award ceremonies for attendance and those drawings and all of that, that is all great. How many kids get them? How many kids get them? Every child gets one of these. Every child gets something with their name on it. Every child gets to open it up and be proud that they're being recognized by the school.
And it's
every
at
single
different
one.
times. So Michele and I talked about this, and we almost did it this time. We're going to try it the next one. She goes, let's not give an envelope to everybody.
That would be mean, huh?
And I said, you know what? At this group, no. We've got a disenfranchised group. No, I don't want to take that chance at all. Now,
I'm just trying to prove an equity point.
But think about it if you did not. And how you feel. Now I'll tell you that Byron does have to collect these when you leave. Sorry. But because we use them for the next presentation, only that's the reason why. But as we go through, when you do that, here are the real results. When you send positive messages every month, different proactive things to K-3 parents, over 4 years, this is 57,000 students we tracked. And what we did is we looked, where did they start? 49% of those students had been truant at least once. 48% of them had what are called excessive excused absences. That's I don't know how to code it, because they went to Disneyland or they went on vacation and came back 2 weeks late. And 35% were already chronic. So here's what we found. First year we did it, chronic rate dropped fast to 14. Those ones that were authority mattered, they changed instantly. So now we know who our tougher group is. But notice our excessive excuse. They didn't listen to us. In year one, they kept, now I'm going to Disneyland. Vacation is when I say it is, not when you say it is. And the second year, vacation is when I say it is. But look what happened by year 4. Because we didn't give up. We did not stop, and we were consistent. And we didn't let the results dismay us. We said, we are not going to drop this. And now you've got manageable populations. And because all of this is getting done for the schools, your time is spent on those students.
And before I forget, because there were so many ahs when he said we were going to collect those cards, do me a favor, if you'd like the deck and some more information, CAAASA will be posting it. We'll make sure it's available. Sometimes it takes us a little minute to decompress and everything. So on your envelope, on the outside of your envelope, if you want information, you want us to follow up with you, you want information, you want the deck immediately, write your name, write your district, your email, write that on the envelope. And when you turn the envelope and the card back in, we'll make sure that we reach out to you and get you the information probably a little bit sooner than you would otherwise have it.
All right. This is Michelle's slide because I am working for her.
Oh, no. Just, we promised you 5 strategies, 5 areas to focus on. And this, we wanted to make sure we got to number 5, which it looks like we are here. But leadership matters. And not just leadership from the superintendent, but leadership at every level. That's why it's so critically important that you have that systematic approach and that it is a shared conversation, a shared understanding why it's important that your child is here at school with empathy, not with some kind of, leaning over somebody, with empathy. How can I help you? I noticed you weren't in school yesterday. I'm so happy to see you at school today. You look good. I missed you. That needs to be part of the culture and the climate of the entire school body. The parents need to know that you're inquiring with love. Okay, the students need to know that you're inquiring with love. But if that tone is not set from the leadership level and shared and educated from the leadership level, it makes it awfully difficult to have that successful systematic approach that she was talking about earlier. So we can have all the data in the world, but you gotta have the people come along with, and you have to have the vision and that plan.
And so what can you do? When you go home, you can start right now emphasizing a strong start as being present. That costs you nothing. I'm not selling anything in this list here. This is about you. What can we do now? Leadership to all families at all levels. If you don't have it systematic, then you can start at the school and you can start building that way. Setting the expectation. Don't wait till August. Do it now. Start talking about next year. Here's how we're going to have next year. Really kind of move that way. Lean into September attendance month. You're supposed to be aware of it. That's a good piece. Create that systemic communication that continues to reinforce it, and schedule those regular intervals to really look at the data. When you do that, and when you intervene, the save rate is how many students change behavior on the first notification. Notice it's less than half. So it's not perfect. It takes time. But you want to get as many of those first ones out as you can, because we can't deal with 50, 60%. We've got to get a system going on that's basically a put in place and forget, just let it run, and then we can put our efforts to the rest. This is what I'm talking about, doing things different. And so we have some folks in California that are new to SI&A this year. And so there's just 4 of them there. One, a very wealthy community, up 6.7%. So when you look at the amount of days that is, that's a 10,000 student district, that is the equivalent of 600,000 more days of education. We have an 80% UDP at 5%, 20,000 kid district, 90% at 5%. They're improving. More students are coming. These school districts are still all at 91 or 92. They still have work to go, but we're changing the lives for some. And so here are the takeaways from today. If you got nothing else, what do you need to put in place?
A system. System.
Okay, let's go to the next. What else do you got to do?
Build equity.
What does that mean? Remember when Michele said the student never had their name said? West Side Elementary up in the desert near Michele, I was there in August, and they said, here's what we're doing the first day of school. We're telling every one of our employees, know the name of the student, know the face of the student, and know their story. That is where you change it. San Benito High School District up in Central California, their superintendent went and sat with the high school seniors about 2 weeks ago. And he and I were talking, and he said the number one thing they said they would like to see changed about the culture here is that their high school teachers do not know who they are. That was the number one. They are starved for connection. My daughter, every time she calls me, she tells me the story of a new student. I didn't even tell her to do that, so it's pretty cool. She's way better than I am, but know the story. That's what we're talking about when we say equity. And then recognize this. Most of the folks that are struggling don't have the foundation. We have to give that to them. We have to continue to do it, and they're not going to get it coming to Parent Ambassador. Not a dig on that. We have to send it to them and give it to them in a way that they can understand it and let them, at their own pace, come to trust us. Number 4.
Communicate, communicate, and over-communicate. There you go.
And do it proactively. Give you a little math problem here because I am the CBO. Once a student becomes at risk and is below grade level, we have to start doing interventions and remediation. How much do you think the average school district pays for intervention and remediation per student? Between $1,000 to $2,000 per year per student that's at risk. The thing that I just showed you is to pay for that would be if you could get 1 or 2 more students to attend every day at every one of your schools. It would pay for the entire proactive focus. $2,000 when you do nothing. A little bit on the front end. That's not a sales pitch. It's, are you going to invest in being proactive and talking to everybody, or are you going to continue to wait until the end? And number 5.
Leadership matters. Leadership matters. And it's not just here. It's at every level. Every single person in your building is a leader when it comes to addressing attendance, when it comes to building relationships, when it comes to caring for our kids, when it comes to making sure that we care about the whole child showing up, not the ADA that we're going to.
Money.
It's not about the money. But they don't know that. If we just tell them that, we have to show them that. So we too have to show up. We have to show up with authenticity. We have to show up with transparency. We have to show up with heart. We have to show up with love. Then our kids will want to be in our buildings. They will want to be in our schools. And I think the important piece here with this one and the other one as well, you have to communicate that. So how does your secretary, your clerk, your noon duty, your campus supervisor, your security, how do they all know this mission? How do they know the priority? How do they know the tone, the expectation of what this should sound like? Because I know if I show up and somebody's in my face, I'm not feeling some kind of way. The rest of not just that in that encounter, Every time I see that person coming, guess what? I don't want to see you. So that one negative impression that you start out with is not going to be easily or readily forgotten. That's going to be their feeling. So we just need to be intentional in how we engage our kids and how we think about engaging our parents in the conversation.
I'm honored to even be in the room to talk to you about this. This is kind of the culmination of a long time starting. I remember as a substitute teacher, the first thing I said my first day was to the kids, I go, if you come every day, I won't let you fail. And that's been my mantra. And to be able to sit in this room or stand in this room and talk with you and do this with Michele, I'm honored because I do believe it's going to take every one of us to really make a difference. And it's going to take us coming across aisles, coming across ethnicities. It's going to take a rare moment of collegiality in a nation that's divided. We have to find ways to come together because it's about our students. And so we are done. We are thankful for you being here, and we're not going anywhere if you have questions.
If you have, and if we can help you, but give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you choosing us, and enjoy the rest of the conference and the rest of your day, and get ready for lunch.